Welcome to the Next Level podcast with me, your host, Dr. Leslie. I have an amazing guest on today. I'm super excited. Adam Clausen. I pronounced that last name correctly, right? Really phenomenal individual. I know enough about him, but not enough to really get into it because I want to save it for the show today. Just a little brief background on him. He was sentenced to 213 years in prison, served 20 of it, and he now has a podcast called Gritability Podcast. And he's very much into fitness with his wife, and we're going to learn everything about him and what he does is the hope. And of course, in keeping up with the show, it's really about finding those practical strategies to make our self-evolution journey more efficient and effective, because that's what I'm all about. So Adam has, I'm sure, a ton of wonderful strategies that we'll be able to learn about today. So welcome, Adam, to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I've been watching, I'm looking at your Instagram, just excited to get in here and have this conversation with you today.
Yeah, thank you. And I know you've been on some podcasts and you have your own, and I'm sure you're very tired at this point talking about so much of your past experience. I want to dive just in a little bit of it to bring context, but like I said, I want to really learn about what you did to cope and what your evolution process is, because that's really what we want to take away here. So why don't you tell us a little bit about maybe who you were before all of this happened? Like, what was Adam like? What were your priorities? What was your sort of point in your evolutionary process?
Wow. Okay. So
Loaded.
If that's where we're going to start, I was the epitome of unhealthy behaviors. Drank a ton, smoked a lot, did a bunch of drugs, made a series of bad decisions that ultimately landed me in prison. Having been a noted athlete throughout my youth, I always had this passion for all things physical. I'm not one of those people who wanted to, sit back and watch the game on TV. I wanted to be there. I wanted to be in the game. There was just I could never be on the sidelines. So I was always looking for an opportunity to get in, to be a part of it. When I look back at those portions of my life where I felt most alive, I was either doing sports, I was, involved in martial arts. I was out there really testing myself physically. The problem was I didn't have the knowledge base. In my immature thinking, chicken, whatever it was, had to be healthy. It didn't matter if it was, drenched in some sort of glaze or if it was from McDonald's McChicken. I was like, it's chicken, it's healthy. I'm trying to do this thing right. I just didn't know anything about nutrition. I didn't know anything, really about training properly, recovery, rest, all of those holistic aspects that come together to really create a healthy mind and body. So although I was pushing myself at times physically, since those other habits were out of whack, my mind just deteriorated, made this series of bad decisions, ultimately leads me to prison where, if I'm being honest about it, I needed some time out of society to get my act together because I was a mess. I was an absolute mess. And one of the first things that I realized was I need to stay active. I need to do something.
Yeah, that's amazing. So at the beginning, like when you were younger in your youth, you were saying you had that fundamental drive and desire to be active. So this is something that was innate in you. You already had that. Was that cultivated in your upbringing? Did you have family that was active, or were you just self-motivated? Like, where did that come from, that foundation? Because that's really what ends up bringing you through this whole journey.
Absolutely. I would say part of it was, I had the good fortune of being blessed with being very athletic. I
Okay.
come from a family of other athletes, but I wasn't, around them all the time. I was part of a couple of different sports organizations, teams that were incredibly successful. Like we rarely lost.
Wow.
So when we did lose, like it was a traumatic event. It's like, oh my God, like this is the end of the world. You see, people losing championship games, they're in tears.
Yeah.
That's what I remember from my youth. Like those couple of losses, how impactful they were. So I learned how to win. I knew that I didn't want to lose. Like that happened very rarely. And that's part of what drove me. I'm just a highly competitive person by nature. And I've learned how to tap into that. Taking that forward, I found that, whenever I was competing with someone, I could push myself a little bit more. So I learned to set myself up where I was always competing against someone.
Really?
Yes.
Wow, that's fascinating. I know some people aren't, like for me, I'm competitive, but I'm competitive with myself. I actually find it's more detrimental. It deters me if I'm competing against someone just because I'm my own person and I feel like, I don't know, it just feels uncomfortable for me to be comparative. I think because I can be so hard on myself and I can be self-deprecating and all those things. Those were my tendencies that I just say, you know what, this is what I maybe want to achieve. I have people who have done it. I like that. That's inspiring. But then I focus on myself. But for you, it's important. It was important to you. And you cultivated that at a young age to be competitive, or at least knowing that works for you. If you're competing with someone. So what did that look like? Was it, again, let's talk about more in your youth so we can understand the foundation. Was it someone on your team? How did that work for you?
For basketball, for instance,
Yeah.
I had an arch rival.
Oh, it was the archer, the nemesis.
There was
I love
the
it.
nemesis. And the funny thing is there were other young men who tried to position themselves as the nemesis. And I'm like, to me, in my mind, it wasn't a competition. Like that was the only person that I was really competing against.
Yeah. Okay.
So again, that's what drove me. I wanted that. I wanted to win so badly. I was willing, again, with basketball, I could sit out on the court literally all night. It's not when the lights went out. I'd be out under the street light until everybody else was gone. And I would just stay there and I'd keep going and keep going. And I knew at a young age that I had an unusual drive.
Okay.
Most people didn't have that. Ultimately, what happened is I allowed that drive to lead me in the wrong direction because everything I did in my life, I did to excess.
Interesting. That is very interesting. So, yeah, and it makes sense. You have this almost superhuman ability to compete and this superhuman willpower to just I want what I want and I'm going to get it. And it's kind of like your greatest strength, but your greatest weakness should you be positioned in the wrong circumstance or whatever. So yeah, I completely understand that. So when did you realize that about yourself? We'll come back to the timeline, but when did you really realize that, this is really awesome, but I have to maybe temper this or, make sure I'm directing in the right way so it's benefiting me.
I remember one particular instance, being at a practice. I'm in high school at the time. I got recruited to a college prep. Now, this is back in the 90s. I'm dating myself here.
It's all right.
Hopefully there's some Kobe Bryant fans.
Yeah.
Right? Kobe's an amazing figure, role model. I actually grew up playing I played in an AAU league that Kobe was also in. Very fortunate to have that exposure, competing at a high level. It was I guess probably I'm 17 years old, maybe a junior in high school. And I'm really pushing myself physically at a practice one day. We're running sprints. I'm always one of the fastest. And I find myself, it's almost like I'm watching a movie and it's someone else because I'm getting slower. People are gaining distance on me as we're running this final sprint. I get down, I touch the line, I turn around, I look, things get a little foggy. Everyone's at the other end of the gym, and I take 2 or 3 steps, and it's kind of in slow motion, and I start to collapse. I fall forward, and I cannot even lift my arms up in front of me to catch my fall, to cushion my fall, and I hit face down, and I bounce.
Oh, wow.
And I'm laying there. The team's at the other end of the gym. The coaches are looking at me, and they're like, at this point, they think I must be joking. They're like, come on, get up. And they realize I'm not moving. I can't physically move. I'm just barely breathing. My breathing's heavy. I'm like, what the heck is, like, what's happening to my body right now? This is a foreign experience. They come rushing towards me, call the ambulance. Come to find out, they take me into the hospital. I have mono. And, mono's generally, it's serious. Like, you have to be conscious of it. But I had run myself into the ground. And it's because I had that ability to literally push through all of those limits that, it could have been much more serious. Took me a while to recover from that. But that's like the one instance that still clearly stands out in my mind because I still can picture that floor coming up at me.
Wow.
And I couldn't stop it. It was the first time I felt physically helpless. So that was one of the first indications that okay, I have something here. Yeah. I better learn how to positively tap into this and not put myself in that same situation again.
Right. And that was in your, how old were you around that
Youth,
time?
I'm like 17 years old.
17.
Yeah.
So you had the inkling, but then still some of the other circumstances were involved that got you into a situation where you had to remove yourself, or you were removed from regular society, right? You went away to prison for quite some time, but much shorter than originally sentenced. So I want to just kind of move a little bit into that experience. So we've sort of established that you realize you have this insane will that you can just achieve pretty much anything that you want. You can just go and get there. When you were in prison and you were sentenced and you went away, firstly, did you have any family? Did you have any partner or children or anything at that time?
All of my relationships were reflective of my lifestyle. They were all very unhealthy.
Okay.
Everyone was living the same way that I was, excluding family. And as a result, I was very distant, say, with my parents, with other family members. And my family was living Midwest, further out. I'm on the East Coast. So I was pretty much on the East Coast by myself.
Okay.
And I had isolated myself, geographically, physically. So yeah, my relationships reflected all of my habits.
I see.
None of it was healthy.
So it was probably a good thing to be removed from that.
I think we can all agree, yes. Yes, I was not fit for society. And listen, I am the first to openly embrace the things that I did. I deeply regret.
Sure.
I committed a string of violent crimes, robberies. I regret all of that.
Sure.
Very fortunate, despite ending up with a life sentence, that I vividly recall the day that I was convicted, not even the sentencing, because when I received the conviction, I knew I had mandatory minimum sentences. So when the jury verdict came back and they said guilty, 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 I knew right then that I had a life sentence because each of those was going to stack up. And, in that moment, it was kind of a surreal experience. But by the time I got into the back of the courtroom and I was in the holding cage, I made a determination. And I would say that was largely guided by those experiences throughout my youth, that I was not going to give up hope. Playing on all those extremely successful teams, having been down 10 in the fourth quarter with just a couple minutes left, come back, win the game. Like, I was the guy that wanted the ball. Give me the ball. I want the last shot. Let me win this game. I guess it was that attitude that I took with me. I'm like, I'm not out. Like, I have a life sentence. I'm not dead. I am going to do whatever I need to do first to get myself to a better place, to where eventually I can get another chance. And I knew intuitively that I was going to have to do some time. That was realistic. I didn't think I was going to do 20 years, but I was prepared at that point. Okay, this is what I need to do. I've been here before. I know how to take on challenge. Like, I've done that. So let me buckle down. Let me figure out how I'm going to face this thing head on and how I'm going to come out on top.
That's amazing. Like, I literally got chills when you were saying that, because that's how I experienced that from your words. It's like that switch flipped in you, where you went from, you could have, and I know many people, when I've worked with them, they get consumed by that moment. Like, in that moment where you had that surreal experience, it's almost like a fork. You could have been totally consumed and overwhelmed and defeated by it. And you could have tucked your tail and just gone into that darkness, and that's going to be it. You could have used all of that, which you learned, to just like do something not good for yourself and not get yourself out of where you were. But literally, there was something that happened. You clicked into your sort of programming, your automatic experience when you were younger, of that will, that strength. No, I know I can do this. It's so powerful. And I want the listeners to really, reflect on their experiences when they get to that moment. Like, you have that choice, and our experiences and what our brain wiring and what we've practiced and what our experiences were will serve us in those moments that we really, really need it. And in your case, they were just part of your upbringing. Some people might need to be a little bit more active in developing those, but you had that in a more natural way. That's so profound. So when you ended up, how much time was it between the conviction and the sentencing? You had a couple of months, or
a couple of months.
And
yeah.
were you in jail, or you were held during that time? You weren't free. So it kind of, the beginning was that moment once you were convicted. Yeah. So you kind of clicked into this. I've got this. This is, I'm going to get my way out of this. You're determined in that moment. How was it, though, as time went on? Because I'm sure you were challenged. I'm sure there were moments when you felt defeated, or you felt weak, or you waffled. Was that the case for you, or were you like, nope, the whole time?
Believe me, there was plenty of self-doubt, right? There was plenty of time for that.
Thank goodness he's human, ladies and gentlemen.
I just never allowed myself to live in that space. And I say it all the time. I can't tell you the last time that I had a bad day, because I just don't allow that. Mm-hmm. I learned that when things are going bad, I'm like, time out, reset. I'm not going to let this get any worse. And the better I got with that, the shorter that time period came before I reset. Okay,
so what does that look like? I'm all about the practicality of everything. So what does your resetting process look like? Firstly, you have to be aware that you're not in your happy space. So you have an enormous amount of ability to reflect in your self-awareness, which was cultivated in you, obviously, when you're in your younger years. But once you how do you know? Let's really dumb it down. How do you know when you're off? What does it feel like to you? Does it feel like something in your body? Do you feel it in your mind? Do you get more mind chatter? Do you feel physically tired? Do you feel like more irritable? What is your tell for yourself when you're off?
I'm very good at self-checks where if I notice the mental chatter is if there's anything negative, like, why did you do that?
Okay.
I'm like, slow down.
Got it. Okay.
I've learned to identify those very, very quickly. The whole habit loop, cue, routine, reward. Like I am on it from immediate. I know what those triggers are. And when I sense those, if it's me getting short, being irritable, I'm like, I'm a little irritable right now. And I've learned to communicate that.
Oh, good.
Which is obviously very helpful for relationships.
Sure.
So things don't spiral out of control. I'm like, I'm a little angry right now, or I'm a little frustrated in this situation. Let me take a step back. What's going on? My wife is incredible because first question she has, when's the last time you ate? I'm like, good question.
She knows you.
Are you a little hangry right now? I'm like, I might be a little hangry right now.
I feel you on that. Yeah, it's the carb anger for me. Yeah, for sure.
So you've been there, right?
My brain needs carbohydrates. I can't do just the John, I had him on the show and he's doing keto. I'm like, I can't even imagine doing like little carbs. I need a little bit because my brain doesn't function. So I get the same way. Like everything just kind of turns on me when I can't eat or a particular type of nutrient that my body needs. So that's great. So
I'm very dialed in. I'm dialed in on the feelings, the emotions. If anything's off, what is my intuition telling me? Is there some sort of turmoil going on here? What is the mental feedback? What is the chatter? I'm constantly assessing those things. And if anything is out of alignment of being positive, where I feel good, I feel healthy, I feel balanced, it's like, okay, let me just check that. Like, where is that coming from? And I'm very good at asking myself those questions and taking the time. And to be perfectly honest, that comes from me spending a lot of time by myself in a single cell, getting comfortable in the silence with myself. I can't imagine how I would have first had the opportunity to find the silence and to find a peace within it outside of prison.
Right.
That time out that you talked about that I needed to get away for a little bit, that's what I needed. My time out was a little bit longer than most. We're not talking about a kid. You put them in the corner for a minute.
Yeah.
There were periods over the course of that first decade that I was incarcerated where I found myself in a cell locked down for a month at a time when there was a riot or something happened, where the extreme chaos on the outside caused isolation that allowed for relief, which you have to be cautious of that because our institutions tend to create people with antisocial behaviors because of that structure.
Sure.
For me, needing some time and being an extreme introvert, I would get locked in the cell and it would be like, I can breathe. I can breathe. And now I can process my thoughts, my feelings, like, where am I? And what do I need to do? I still needed to be physically active to find balance. I learned that about myself. So as long as I maintained a high level of physical activity every day, which is a constant part of my life, I could have the peace, the balance that I needed. Then as other things came up that were slightly out of alignment, I could, ask myself that question. Okay, what's going on here? Being in that situation also allowed me the opportunity to read. I don't know if you've seen the set, but many of my favorite books are over there.
Oh.
They are all performance-based, cognitive-based, physical. Many of them are about, habits, introspection, and really cultivating that self-awareness, figuring out what allowed me to function optimally. And then putting those habits, those practices into my daily routine so that became consistent. And prison is very structured.
Sure.
So it supported me developing those healthy habits for the most part. I mean, obviously, like I wasn't able to choose all of my meals. I couldn't eat as healthy as I wanted.
Right.
But I became much more conscious about making healthy choices with the information I now had. I knew that not all chicken
It's created equal.
Yeah. The McChicken
Sure.
sandwich wasn't all that healthy. So,
Right. Oh, there's so much that you touched on that I want to dive into. Firstly, you were saying that stillness, you didn't say the word. That's how I'm extracting it. You were given the opportunity to be still, or to at least give that opportunity where you can reflect and get into your own head and heart and whatever. How do you take that you were sort of kind of pushed into your daily life now? So like, do you there's a lot of gurus that talk about presence and mindfulness. And, I'm a big advocate of meditation. I did an enormous amount. That's how I get quiet. That's how I tune in with myself. And I try to stay in that spot throughout the day. It's almost automatic where I can just kind of click in and out of it because I've just become accustomed to it. So in those moments of stillness or blank mind, it gives me the opportunity to just, again, kind of check myself, how my body tells me really how I'm feeling versus the mind chatter. The mind chatter starts acting up once the physical body starts feeling out of whack. So how is that for you? Like you said that you check yourself throughout the day. Are you in a state when you do that? Do you have to actively do it? Do you set a timer? Like, tell us specifically how that sort of is for you.
well, I'm very conscious of setting the stage, making sure first thing in the morning when I get up, I have my daily routine, which is very much the same as it's been for the last almost 20 plus years.
Okay.
Many of those things, getting up, drinking quite a bit of water,
Okay.
helping to get the system going. And I'm very conscious of not picking up my phone first thing,
Good.
just because I know that that's going to take my mind in a different path. I really want to ease into my morning, focus on those positive things that the intentions that I have set for the day, which generally begins the night before.
Yep. Yeah, I'm the same way, right? The night before, you set your intentions, you calm into sleep in a whatever state that you want to wake up in, right?
Yes.
So you do that as part of it starts the night before.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
It's a primer
Right.
the night before
is.
to make sure that I'm stepping into the new day in a certain mindset. I'm at peace.
Beautiful.
I let go of all the whatever negative thoughts all that's gone.
Yeah.
So I start my day. I make sure that it remains lights are low, all of those things. It's very calm. I'm up at 4 a.m. every morning.
Wow, early bird.
Yes, I feel like that's the time, especially now I have an 18-month-old son.
Oh, yeah.
I have to be up at that time. Like if I want any time, quiet time for myself, yeah,
Oh, nice. Okay.
it requires me getting up a little bit earlier.
Okay.
But I also appreciate, again, I'm going to do more than anybody else. I'm a big believer that, if you want an extraordinary life, you have to be willing to do extraordinary things. You have to be willing to do what others won't to get and achieve those things, that you want. And for me, that's getting up a little bit earlier to make sure that I have that space, that quiet time. And then I get out the door. Probably about 30 minutes later, like there's a little bit more in there. My coffee. Coffee is a big part of my routine. I enjoy that. And caffeine does not affect me in any negative way within reason, as long as I don't go crazy with it.
Sure.
So a little bit of coffee, I go through that whole normal routine. Then I'm out the door. I run every morning. It's not because I enjoy running, believe me. That's one of those habits that I picked up in prison.
Okay.
in order for me to mentally reset, balance, really process my thoughts. Read a book many, many years ago, Running with the Mind on Meditation. And for
Wonderful.
me, that was one of those, there was a connection there because I, through martial arts, had started meditating early on, but there became so much chatter, it became very difficult for me. So now here I am all these years later in a prison cell, finding some silence, finding some peace, getting back in tune, being able to meditate. I found that. But when the chaos, normal daily routine, in order to find that, I would run. And not with music on, not with anything else, but just be able to go. And it allowed clarity of thought, to process, to work through those things, and to really focus on what I wanted, where I was going. Put me in a positive state of mind. Naturally, the endorphins, everything gets flowing. I'm feeling better. And by the time I get in, from that run, I'm already in a great, not a peak physical state, but like I'm coming up. I'm feeling good.
Yeah.
I'm ready to go. Now I'm ready to process things on a higher level. If I want to sit down, I need to do some emails. I'm really going to write out what's my agenda for the day. Like, what are those key things that I need to do? Keeping my priorities in place. And my family is at the top of that list. So although I'm super driven and I'm going to do whatever I got to do to get the job done, it's like, time out. Here's priority number 1, right? Family, fitness. Like, okay, where are those things? You can't push them down the list. If you're saying those first things are first, you gotta live that. So I make sure that they're there, and then I start to get into the rest of my work day, and I've got to jump on everybody else.
Right.
I'm like, oh, you're just getting up now?
Arouse everyone around you. I love
That's
it.
my competitive nature, right? I'm like, I already got mine in. So.
I love it. That's great. So you really, this is very interesting because I find this too, and this really is in truth everywhere. Our bodies and our minds are so closely linked. And nutrition feeds our body feeds our mind. Like, it's all holistic. And so for you, you really get into your body. You've learned that it was always part of your experience even when you were in your youth, but it gets you into state. It gets the blood pumping. It gets your mind clear. You do meditation, obviously, is part of that process, right? You have a whole thing that you do when you run. It's not just you're running. You're doing something when you run too.
True.
Right?
Yeah.
Do you want to share a little bit with what that is or what that experience is when you're running that releases and clears you and gets you in that state when you can then be focused on your intentions and just kick ass?
It's part of that's my self-talk, my affirmation.
So you're doing affirmations when you're running.
I'm extraordinary. I'm willing to do what others won't so that I can achieve and have what others don't.
I've
said that to myself literally tens of thousands of times when I was out on that track, running an oval track in the snow, 3 feet deep. This is literal. This is real life experience.
Oh, yeah.
My tracks were the only tracks out there. And I took great pride in that. While everyone else is like, man, you're out of your freaking mind. Like, what are you doing out there? I'm like, this is my commitment to myself. I said, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do it. I know that no one else is willing to do it. And that makes me feel good. Like, I don't want to be like everybody else anymore.
That's amazing.
And it was running, that thing that there were times where I hated running. I hated going out in the cold. But I felt like if I did that, I knew the positive physical benefits. I knew that by maintaining those habits, like I was keeping a commitment to myself. It gave me some sense of personal agency in a situation that honestly, there was a lot of times I had very little control over my environment, over what was happening, but I always maintained control of myself. And that was a way for me to hold on to that. Like, here's something that I can do. And I learned to take those physical activities, find different ways to tap in. When I talked about the competitive part, I've learned to make my goals public. Like if I come on here and I say something crazy, like I'm going to go out and do this crazy challenge this weekend that we are going to do.
Okay.
If I'm going to go out and do this crazy challenge, like I have to do it. If no one else shows up, I'm still going to do it. That's how I ended up running my first marathon in prison on an oval track, 26.2 miles. That would, under normal circumstances, be a mind-numbing experience. But under that circumstance, what it did was it reinforced my belief in myself, which I needed at that point. It also was a goal that I put out. I'm like, here's what I'm going to do. And people were like, really? And I'm like, damn, like they're not doubting me. I need people to, I want you to doubt me so that I can prove you wrong that I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, I'm going to do it under 4 hours. And they're like, I don't know about that. I don't think you can do it. I'm like, yes.
That's what I needed.
Let me go. So I went out there and I was a guy who had, at that point, hadn't run more than a couple miles in my life at any one time. And I went out there one weekend and, you know,
Amazing.
with a friend of mine who was a runner, I'm like, you just go and I'm going to keep up and we'll get it done. And we did. And that taught me, because there was a recovery period. My body was not prepared for that level of torture.
Sure.
So, you know, for like a month going down the stairs, I was unstable. My legs were literally that fatigued, but it taught me your body will carry you. Like your mind is incredible, the influence that it has over your body. So I need to be very conscious of this, and I know what I'm capable of. So no limits.
You have, that ability to just fixate, hyper focus on your goal, no matter what your body is telling you. Did you prepare at all for that? Or you just decided one day and then the next you just ran it and your body just did it? Or did you have some preparation?
There was about 6 days of visualization.
So you visualized?
Oh, yeah. It was, I ran it in my mind. I know that's going to sound a little crazy to some people, but there's plenty of research on visualization.
I was just going to say tons that actually your muscles believe that you're running it. If you feel it, you experience it. And you had a lot of time alone to create that mind-muscle connection where you probably ran it multiple times in those 6 days.
I did.
In that 4 hours.
I did. But, you know,
incredible.
Explaining that to most people who aren't familiar with the research, they're like, you're out of your mind. There's people who think I'm losing my mind at this point, right? They're like, what is going on with you, dude? Like,
yeah.
But yeah, that was my reality. And, I just kept setting crazy physical goals for myself to keep me focused on, pushing myself forward and really keeping that realm of possibility open in my mind, knowing that I was facing an impossible situation. And if I kept proving that I was able to do these things that other people, including myself, didn't necessarily think were possible, then I could achieve anything, whatever I set out to do. And ultimately, that's what I had to do. I had to do a lot of things that had never been done before in order to win that second chance at life. But that's what set the foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go into, I want to talk a little bit about the nutrition, but first I want to just dive into when you had these setbacks, as I'm sure, you had this incredible focus with your fitness and that strength. How did that help or translate into the challenge of you trying to fight for your freedom? Because that you had control 100% over your body. You don't have 100% control out of the system that may or may not be challenged and or broken or whatever. There are challenges, and sometimes to be heard and to get advocacy and all the things. So That's different, right?
Oh, yes.
So you had moments, I'm sure, when you became frustrated. How did you deal with that?
There's a good story with this where a friend of mine comes to me. He's another guy serving a life sentence. And he says, hey, we're working with a criminal justice professor at the University of Pittsburgh, a guy named Dr. Tony Gaskew, became a personal mentor, a dear friend. And at the time, he's the professor. And he says, I want you guys to be a part of this class with me. Had been students. He's bringing us in as basically, adjunct professors working with these classes, criminal justice classes. We're putting them together. We develop a model. And my partner, this other guy who's doing this life sentence, says, hey, I'm going to put in for this conference. It's at Vanderbilt University. We're going to submit this presentation and see if we can get approved to do it via video conference. Now, being inside, for anybody who knows anything about the Federal Bureau of Prisons, federal system, it's like Area 57. Like, you can't, it's this mysterious place you can't get in, and nobody's supposed to see what's going on inside. So we submit this presentation that he and I are going to do together at this conference, Higher Education in Prisons.
That is amazing.
Yeah,
Wow.
it gets accepted. Like, the professors are like, oh, we'd love to hear from you guys. We want to make this
Wow.
happen.
Wow.
And, within the bureaucracy, sometimes things slip through the cracks for a minute. So we get all the way up to the presentations have been submitted. We have it all outlined, like we're prepared to do this. And suddenly, the Bureau of Prisons legal department in Washington, D.C. comes back and is like, who approved this? Like, shut it down. Now, mind you, my wife is already down at Vanderbilt. My mother has flown down there to be a part of this too. My partner's wife is out there. So our families are there to be a part of this. There's huge crowds expecting this for us to give this presentation. And the Bureau of Prisons is like, nope, shut it down. And I'm like, okay. So they won't let us do the video conference. We're able to make 15-minute calls. I was like, you and I are going to put it on the clock, and we'll go back and forth. We'll give these 15-minute calls. We'll have our families there. Like, we're going to do this presentation. I got this. Don't worry about it. And
Like
he's
on speakerphone with your family type thing, or?
kind of like we can call. They're going to be on the cell phone. They're going to hold it up. Like, our pictures will still be up here. Oh, wow. So we'll be able to speak live. And we're like, yeah, we can do this. Meanwhile, my partner wasn't so sure at the beginning, but I talked him into this. I was like, we got this, man. Because I'm quick. I'm like, no obstacles, no barriers, right? We're going to get it done. And they catch wind of us relaying this across the phones, and they call us in. They're like, check this out. We said the conference was off. They're like, you make another phone call, say another word about this, and we're throwing you in the hole, and you're going to sit there, meaning sitting in segregation for who knows how long.
Yeah.
We're like, okay, we're not giving this presentation. And there was a moment there where I was definitely deflated, but I still vividly recall he and I were standing on the rec yard, and he's upset. He's like really upset about this. And again, I'm feeling deflated, but I'm like, no, there's got to be another way. And I'm like, you know what we're going to do? I was like, man, if they won't let us, participate out there, we're going to bring them here. He's like, what? What are you talking about? I was like, we have people from the community come into the prison. I was like, let's bring the conference here. He's like, oh, you've lost your mind.
Wow.
He was like, you think they're going to let all these people come in here and do this? I'm like, I got this, man. Don't worry about it. So what I did,
tenacious.
I went down and I start drawing up a flyer. I'm like, these are the people who are going to be here. This is the event that we're going to hold. And I go to the associate warden, she's like the head of programs at the time. I said, here's what I want to do. She looks at me and she's like, I don't know. She's like, you're a big thinker. She's like, I can appreciate that. She's like, but I don't know about that. I don't know how we get this thing approved. I'm like, we're going to make this happen. And I had written the next year's date on that. It didn't happen the next year. but it did happen 2 years later. And
Wow.
and then it happened again the year after that. And I had
Wow.
individuals fly in to be a part of this. And again, it was, you know, having that experience, doing those things that had never been done, taking that from a personal experience and being able to transition that into these bigger events that involved other people and getting them, the more of these things that I did, the more I got other people to buy into. They're like, oh, you're saying we're doing this? All right.
Yes.
Like if you said it, yeah, it's happening. And that
Wow.
became the new normal. Again, sometimes to a detriment because, you know, there were times where I pushed a little bit too hard. And, you know,
That little excess that you got going on.
I put a little bit too much energy into it, too much enthusiasm. But ultimately, clearly it worked out, right?
Sure.
I am here. So
Amazing.
I am living proof of that. But, you know, for all of those doubters, all of those naysayers who are like, well, okay, you can do that now in prison. Like, what are you going to do when you get out? Like, are you going to keep going to the gym every day? Are you going to eat healthy like this all the time? Like, what happens when you can go out to restaurants every night? What happens if you start this family that you're talking about and you have a little one? Like, how do you keep doing all those things? Like, can you really do it? Well, here I am, you know, a couple years later, I'm still doing it.
Right.
And occasionally, you know, I go on social media and I'll post a picture just to let people know. It's got nothing to do with ego at this point.
Sure.
It's just to let them know, like, I'm keeping my commitments.
Yeah.
Because the best way to see someone's discipline is in the physical results,
Right.
right? Like there are some things that you just can't hide. So
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in that. It's what keeps me honest too.
Sure.
If I say I'm going to go post a picture,
Right.
again, that's me making my goals public. I know there's a certain level of accountability there.
Yeah. It's risky,
It's risky.
but you love it. It feeds
It's
you.
great
Yeah. For
motivation for
you,
me.
it's a big motivator for sure.
Which is, I'm sure, surprising to most because I'm such an extreme introvert. You would think that's more someone who's willing to do those things might be more extroverted. I've just found it as a means, probably because I'm an introvert, because I'm not comfortable in the spotlight. I know that using that as a motivation is even more inspiring. It's going to compel me further, more quickly. So
Yeah.
it's just a tool.
That's amazing. So when you were planning the conference and your strategy to gain your freedom back, did you use the same process of visualization, or were there other pieces that you had to pull in because there were other forces other than just yourself you were up against?
Same exact process. It was me being able to take that practice, that visualization, watch myself go around that track over and over, just knowing in my mind, okay, this is something I've never done before, physically done, but I've seen it. I feel I get out there. It's already familiar because I've done it in my head. It was the same thing with those conferences. Most people don't know. I had what's the number one fear?
Public speaking.
Public speaking, right? My fear of public speaking was so debilitating that the very first time, that's why you always see me with a bottle of water.
Wow.
The very first time I got the opportunity to speak in front of a class, criminal justice class, I had my 10 minutes mapped out at the end of a course to get up there. I had my whole presentation. I got two words out before my mouth physically went bone dry and I could not speak. I looked around. I'm like, oh my gosh, where's some water? And that criminal justice professor, who's a dear friend and mentor, loves to talk, loves the stage, saw that opportunity, got right in there. And for that last 10 to 20 minutes, I had to stand in the back. He did not let me get back in. And I said, that will never happen to me again. So I took every opportunity to face that fear head on, to cultivate it, because I knew that this was a skill that I needed in order to bring the rest of my vision to life. So when I was picturing this conference, seeing myself out there speaking as the MC to this entire event, terrifying. Part of me was absolutely terrified. Like, I remember the physical sensations of that going, no, like, I am not going to be. The
Wow.
difference between fear and excitement is the breath, right? How true is that?
Yeah, for sure.
Fear, we hold our breath. Excitement, we breathe. And I kept reminding myself of that. And I did it so many times in my head that when I got out there, I'm leading this event. My opening remarks, I get about 2 minutes in and I go blank. I know that I have notes about 20 yards away from me over on this table.
Yeah.
This is a room filled with roughly 250 people, a gym.
Mm-hmm.
They're all looking at me. And this isn't just like the pregnant pause. This is like, I'm blank. I'm
Like-
done.
Like you need the hook to pull you off the stage. Done.
It was about that in my mind. That's how long it's taken. And I just,
Gosh.
I'm like, you know what? Just breathe. You got this. You've been here before. You've seen all this before. I exhaled, smiled, and man, it was there. And it was that moment. That was a defining moment because I needed to lead by that example. I needed to successfully MC this event, make sure that it was a success because it opened the door to everything else that happened afterward. And it was in that moment, which is why it's still so clear that self-doubt evaporated. I learned how to deal with that. I've been here before. That visualization has got me here. I've got this.
That's so powerful. Yeah. Visualization is something that I utilize as well. And it really is like for people who don't know that power truly, like dive into the research about it. Like it literally can be transformative once people understand that connection with the body. And then also, as you're saying, physically exercising the body, moving the body, that connection, you are like supercharged. So love that takeaway today. I do want to talk a little bit about the nutrition piece. How did you manage when you were incarcerated? Because for me, and I mean, this is just really common knowledge too, exercise is super important, obviously, for the conditioning and our wellness and well-being. But nutrition in terms of weight management and just feeding ourselves and, you know, the connection with, again, our mind and our body's health. I mean, nutrition is the majority of it. So how did you manage and how did you kind of feed yourself in a way that kept you going and kept you healthy and supported your goal?
Honestly, it was about making the best, healthiest choices under those conditions, where it got to a point to where it was almost detrimental to have all of this knowledge, to walk in to, you know, the dining hall, the chow hall, whatever you want to call this, where they're serving meals and go, there are no good choices here. Like normally I wouldn't eat any of this stuff, but man, I got to pick something here.
Yeah.
Like you can go to the commissary and purchase other things. Mm-hmm. Again, I could get fish, which is in a package, high sodium. I mean, you can't eat that every day. You can't eat tuna, packaged tuna, you know, mercury. And I'm going, I have all this mental chatter. Like I know all of these things.
Right.
I want to make healthy choices. But under these circumstances, I just have to make the best choice. And a lot of times that was by subtraction, meaning when I go through the line, I take the piece of cake that's up there and I'm going to trade it off for, you know, whatever else I can get in exchange for it. Instead of saying, well, I just need some calories to fill me up. And even what I was getting in exchange usually wasn't good. I'm going to be honest. I used to dream about going to Whole Foods.
Really?
Yeah,
What would you get in your dream at Whole Foods?
This is going to sound crazy, right? This is going to tell you how clearly I was malnourished because I would dream about going into the produce section and seeing like the reds, the yellows, the green peppers. I'm like, oh, my, how vibrant they are.
Wow.
Because there's no color in prison.
Right.
Like, and the
Grays and whites.
oh man.
yeah,
And the food is generally the same color. It's very bland. Everything is canned. Fruits, are very limited. They won't give citrus because it's easy to make wine. So you're going to get maybe an apple, a banana, and these are the produce that nobody else will buy. So they're generally damaged. They're not, believe me, it's not the same quality that you're going to get in the supermarket. So when I get to go in and look at the 5,000 different species of apples that they have now, I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
I know it sounds crazy to get excited about something like that, but when you have been that malnourished, and I look back at pictures of me when I walked out and taking very, very good care of myself, I look back, I'm like, wow, I look sickly. I don't look healthy.
Right. Were there times when you chose just not to eat versus eat something?
Are you talking about like hunger strikes?
Just because sometimes people have found that if they go through a fast or just because the choices may not have been ideal during a certain period of time, that it was just maybe better for your body or for whatever process you're going through just to temporarily fast than to put something in your body that you knew wasn't going to be ideal. Or in that circumstance, you're just like, we need whatever because you've just been malnourished for so long.
I've handled that a couple different ways.
Okay.
I've done fasts. I've done fasts for over, I think the longest was 20 plus days, maybe 25 days, somewhere in that neighborhood. But that wasn't really like a physical reset. It was more of, I did a talking fast for similar, I'm going to say like a week, 2 weeks. But did a food fast also, just kind of things to challenge myself, right?
Sure.
For me, though, I choose not to fast because I have such a high activity level. I have found for me, and it's funny you were talking about John on the keto and just not working for you. At this point, I have my nutrition pretty well dialed in, and I choose my words very carefully. I'm careful never to say diet. What I do is not dieting, because people associate that with somehow depriving yourself of something. Sure. And I don't ever feel like I'm missing out.
Yes, and I am the same way, and I'm glad you mentioned that too. Diet is not dieting. That's right. It's my food intake. So very good. Yeah.
Yes,
Yep.
I'm all about good nutrition, and I have found those things that I really enjoy. And I was saying, like when I open up a menu at a restaurant, like I know I'm looking at, there's great meats, there's great fish, plenty of vegetables. Like other people are going to look at all of those, generally the unhealthy items, and hey, you're not going to get dessert. I'm like, no, like I just had everything that I wanted right there. I am good.
Yeah.
I am so good. And by choosing to focus on those things that, one, I know are healthy for me, and two, that I enjoy, I never feel like I'm missing out. I don't feel like there's any sacrifice. And I know the physical results.
Yeah.
And I can tell minor differences if my dairy intake is a little bit higher, if I am eating more lean meats, specifically chicken. For some reason, my body responds very well to chicken. Like I see increased vascularity. The reason I can see those results is because I stay healthy. I am very lean, and it allows me to track where I'm at very easily. Like I can look in the mirror and tell like how dialed in I am in my nutrition.
Yeah.
And that's what I appreciate, and I feel good about that.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. I love it. We are at time.
Wow. That flew by.
We're actually a little over. I know. There's so much more. I need to have you back on the show at some point to dive more into all of the mind-body connection and manifestation and all the things in your belief systems about that. But we don't have time. Another time. So where can we have people come and see your podcast? It's Gritability, right? Gritability Podcast.
The power of perseverance, overcoming seemingly insurmountable odds to attain the life of your dreams. And I get to co-host that with my wife, who we didn't even talk about her, but she is absolutely amazing. Like she's the nutrition guru. I get to write the workouts. She's the one who, puts the meals together. And
then I'll have her on my show next
there
to
you
talk
go.
nutrition for sure.
She is the boss. She's yeah, absolutely amazing. And we love what we're doing with Gritability and, highlighting those stories. So
Great. Well, everyone tune in and listen to his show. Thank you so much for sitting here and sharing your story and all of your insights and the amazing journey. I'm so looking forward to seeing what is next for you and how you're going to get to the next level in your journey. So we'll stay in touch for sure.
yes, definitely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. All right. Until next time.